family. Her daughters Lee, Tracy, Frances, Lorraine, were, and her stepdaughters, we pray for Marilyn, who's deceased. We ask God's mercy on her soul, and also for Tony and Julie. We pray also for her grandchildren, Shannon, Mile, Ryan, Asher, Lily, Georgia, Sadie, Bee, Billy, and Ren. We pray for all the family and close friends of Lorraine at this very sad time as we commend her to God. In the waters of baptism, Lorraine died with Christ and rose with him to new life. May she now share with him eternal glory.
On behalf of Lorraine's family, I want to thank you all for gathering here today. The fact that so many of you have come along is a measure of the love that she had for us and the love that we have for her.
It means a lot to see so many familiar faces. It means a lot to see so many supportive faces. It really does give us strength. Thanks as well to those who are watching around the world via the live stream of this funeral. Friends in New Zealand, friends in America, friends in Europe, and in particular, 4 of Lorraine's grandchildren, Mile, Ryan, Asher, and Lily. We're missing you today. We know you are here in spirit. It is such a great honour to pay tribute to such a great woman. Like many of you, I admired Lorraine. I adored Lorraine. She was such a vivid conversationalist. She was such a wonderful raconteur. She was a woman of such enormous charisma. I loved her mischievous sense of humour. I loved our gentle, sporting rivalry. And I wonder whether those two things have come together in this moment. That getting the Pommy son-in-law to deliver a eulogy was an attempt by Lorraine to get the last laugh. That in the midst of an Ashes series between England and Australia, she wanted to look down from heaven with a guarantee of seeing an Englishman cry. Well, lots of tears have already been shed. More will doubtless flow. And many of us have been drawn here today out of a profound sense of loss, a profound sense of personal bereavement. But many of us have come here today sharing a profound sense of good fortune, a profound sense of gratitude, a profound sense that all of us were recipients of a great gift, the gift of being able to call her a mum, a grandma, a sister, a mentor, a friend. I have no hesitation in calling her a great Australian, for the phrase Aussie legend truly applied to her. And that's because so many of the traits we love and cherish about this country were resident in Lorraine. That love of laughter, that love of storytelling, that larrikin spirit, that lack of pretension, the strong sense of egalitarianism, the kind-heartedness, the warmth, the generosity, the grit, the bravery. Lorraine personified the bigness of this land, the sense of destiny, the sense of possibility. The irony, of course, was that this proud Australian came from across the Tasman Sea. She was born on a rainy Saturday night in Auckland on June the 11th, 1938, the first child of Nolene and Harry Bull, a couple who'd won what today would be millions on the Tats lottery. And when her father first held this small baby in his arms, the rain thundering down outside, he asked, why don't we call her Lorraine? Lorraine Bull came into a world on the brink of war, an epic history that fascinated her for much of her life. She didn't only watch the winds of war over and over, as her daughters will attest. She lived the winds of war. This epic history touched her remote homeland of New Zealand. When she was aged just 18 months, her father went off to serve in the Navy and didn't return until 3.5 years later. The eldest of 6 children, she grew up in the farming community of Picaluna, a dreamy-sounding place that she later described as the coldest, wettest and most forsaken place in New Zealand. From an early age, Lorraine eyed more distant horizons. She wouldn't want us to shy away from the fact that she was the daughter of alcoholics. Her memoir was entitled Love and Addiction. The recurring sight of her parents pouring their first drinks was not just formative, but defining. It's the key that helps us unlock her life. She was a convent girl who almost got expelled when she was caught dancing at a local dance. She was a student at Teacher Training College in Wellington who worked in the kitchens and even in a biscuit factory to pay her own way, even though her parents were millionaires. As well as being a child of the war, she was a teenager of the 50s, a dancing queen dressed in bobby socks and flats, a lover of galas and parties, a music fan electrified by the songs of Elvis Presley, Dean Martin, and Frank Sinatra. After graduating from college, she taught for a while and then became a farmer's wife. Plan A, she told her friends, was Plan Arnold, the name of her first husband, the father of her first 4 beautiful girls, Lee, Tracy, Frances, and Jo. But this girl from Picaluna wanted to swap life in the countryside for life in the big city. And when the family moved to Auckland, it dramatically changed the trajectory of all their lives. To help look after the girls, she hired a babysitter called Marilyn Wood and invited Marilyn's parents to come to one of her parties. When she opened the door, she fell in love with a man standing there, a real estate agent called Bill Wood. Later, she became his wife, the stepmother of 3 more girls, Marilyn, Tony, and Julie. And not long after, a mother again, Fleur, yet another daughter, made it 8. Soon she became a new immigrant. The Kiwi became an Aussie. And the now former teacher became a hard-working entrepreneur, the co-owner of Blunt's, a successful and award-winning real estate business. Working alongside Bill, she became the property manager. In fact, she insisted on becoming the property manager because that job was so often performed by men. As the business grew, she became a passenger in a gold Rolls-Royce and the soulmate of its driver. And together, her and Bill would travel all over the world, to Vegas to hear her beloved Dean Martin, to the Olympics to cheer on the Aussies, to India, the Great Wall of China, Beverly Hills, and Hollywood. But it was a journey to Arizona that would forever change their lives. Lorraine wasn't only the daughter of alcoholics. Bill, though sober by the time he met her, was an alcoholic too. And they decided to seek help at the Meadows, a treatment center in Arizona. It was there they got the idea of setting up a treatment center of their own. South Pacific Private would bring new ideas and what was then a pioneering program to Australia. Women's Weekly, in a 2-page spread that featured a smiling picture of its female co-founder, called it Australia's answer to the Betty Ford Clinic. All this took enormous hard work, enormous courage, enormous optimism. But Lorraine always lived by the words of one of her great wartime heroes, Sir Winston Churchill. A pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. Well, that was Lorraine. She was the thrower of extraordinary parties, and she took having fun seriously. Those New Year's Eve celebrations were planned meticulously. The arrival of those post-midnight pies planned with military precision. Frank Sinatra impersonators had to perform My Way just so. She was the maker of great memories. She took this seriously too. Holidays, tickets to concerts and musicals, extravagant children's parties, once-in-a-lifetime adventures, big Christmases. I told her once she was the most generous person I know. And she said it's easy to be generous when you have money. But all of us know miserly millionaires. Some of my favourite memories of Lorraine were when we broke bread together alone. Breakfast at the River Cafe under the Brooklyn Bridge on her 80th birthday. Lunch at Bathers Pavilion to ask permission to propose to Fleur. I'm glad to report she said yes. Dinner one night in Sydney after she'd heard a talk I'd given at the Opera House. I mentioned the venue because it seemed to make her so proud, and making her proud meant so much to me. She was a pillar of the local community, a personal friend of Australian Prime Ministers. She even befriended the Kennedys. And it was Robert Kennedy who popularised the quote from the great Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw. Some men see things as they are and ask why. I dream of things that never were and ask why not. Well, Lorraine was an ask why not sort of girl. Go off to teacher training college even though she didn't know how she was going to make ends meet? Why not? Leave the economic security of New Zealand for Australia? Why not? Go for dinner with your husband and only order desserts? Why not? Set up a hospital even though you have no experience of health or psychiatric care? Why not? Expand that hospital even though it means winning over the sceptical banks who question whether a woman in her 70s had the energy to do it. Why not? And that why not came with a few expletives as well. And continually asking why not means that she leaves behind an extraordinary legacy. A legacy at the hospital in bricks and mortar, but more importantly, a legacy in flesh and blood. The tens of thousands of lives she personally helped change for the better. And her spirit lives on. We see it in her daughters. We see it in her beloved grandchildren, in the business smarts of Asher, the warmth and compassion of Georgia, the grace and creativity of Sadie, the decency of Bede, the likability of Marl, the strength of Ryan, the tender heart of Billy, the camaraderie and love of family of Shannon, the originality of Ren, the intellectual curiosity of Lily. And not only does she leave us a great legacy, the girl from Picaluna offers us a great lesson. To live life big, to live life bold, to live life brave, to live life searching out new horizons, believing in the boundless possibility they can bring. Lorraine was a great Australian. She was a giant of the 12-step community. She was a towering matriarch, a unique and special woman. I was so proud to call her my mother-in-law and so grateful to call her my friend.
As the daughter who's known my mother longer than any of my sisters, actually from 9 months after her wedding to my father Arnold, I have the privilege of sharing some words about Lorraine. Mum was many different people over the course of her life. She was called Laurie Bull as a teenager. I didn't really know Laurie Bull of Picaluna, and Laurie Bull certainly had no concept of the life that was in front of her. What I do know is that she couldn't wait to leave Picaluna and the family farm behind when she headed to the Big Smoke in Wellington, where she met her lifetime friends, the Garden Road girls at Teachers Training College. Funny enough, she then married a boy from Picaluna, that would be Arnold, and spent a few more years there as a farmer's wife before insisting on a move to warmer climes in the Waikato. I don't think she ever milked a cow, but she did have a green thumb and always had glorious flower gardens, and right up to the end would always have a house filled with flowers. Tracy remembers the transition from country bumpkin to city slicker. Following the removalist truck was the family Vauxhall Velox towing a trailer full of pumpkins grown out the back of the cowshed for reasons that don't need explanation. I wonder what our suburban Auckland neighbours thought of the Hanson family pulling up to our new brick and tile house with a trailer full of pumpkins. Mum was an opinionated authoritarian growing up, and I was an anti-establishment nonconformist, so it wasn't always smooth sailing, until I did grow up, which I think may have been around my 50th birthday. Mum was one of the first generation of truly independent women who entered the workforce and earned their own money. She had a few occupations: secretary, biscuit factory person. I'm not sure what she actually did there. It's hard to envisage Lorraine on an assembly line. Teacher, secretary, cleaner, TV salesman, and real estate agent, where she managed over 1,000 rental properties with military precision, and with Bill was instrumental in changing the way Sydney-siders sold houses when they were one of the very first companies who began auctioning clients' homes at a time when the most traditional route was to use the multi-list system, along the way creating one of Sydney's leading independent real estate agencies. But it was creating South Pacific Private Hospital that was really her passion and her life's work. As the oldest child of alcoholic parents, she made it her life's mission to sober up planet Earth. As a teenager, that was a real buzzkill, although I did come around to her way of thinking in the end. Her life in the recovery movement took her to America, where she met a fabulous group of women who she called her tribe. She encouraged us, her daughters, to attend the annual sojourn at Miraval in Arizona with these accomplished women. It took a few of us a bit of convincing to spend time in the Sonoran Desert with Mother and her friends, but it only took one visit and we were hooked. It truly is a magical place, and my sisters and I will always remember and think of Mother when we go there in the future. One of her soul sisters, Sharon Wichita Cruz, told us this week about her first visit to Australia. Mum was so excited to be hosting Sharon and Joe that she forgot where she parked at the airport and had to hire a taxi to drive around until they found her car. Mum was an ardent royalist right up to the end, although in the last few months she did get rather cross with Duchess Megan for not sharing more photos of baby Archie. Mum was also a great homemaker, an Antipodean version of Martha Stewart, perhaps. She was the queen of dinner parties in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s and the 90s, and our family Christmas days were truly wonderful. She was a great cook, always trying new recipes, often cut out of magazines, and she passed that love of cooking down to most of her daughters. However, none of us can cook a roast dinner quite like Mum. She was an amazing sewer on her trusty Husqvarna, making herself outfits worn by one of her idols, Jackie Kennedy, right down to the pillbox hat. Fleur does not truly appreciate the 10-year age gap between her and Joanne. Mum would make 4 identical outfits for myself, Tracy, Francis and Joanne, which was awful. But I guess worse for Jo, who got to wear the same dress for many years as it was handed on down. Mum was a compulsive decorator and a lifetime lover of bright colours. The brighter the better. Growing up, we had canary yellow kitchens, lime green dining rooms, and bright orange flowered wallpapered family rooms. I do not think it is a coincidence that today I dress mainly in black. My first recollection of Mum's penchant for decorating was in the 1960s on the farm in Waihau, where she took out a wall, creating an open-plan kitchen about 50 years before the rest of the population caught on to the concept. She painted the tongue and groove cupboards, alternate stripes of black and white, again, way before her time. And the reason I know this is some of my eastern suburbs friends have exactly the same colour scheme happening today. Mum was generous, with her generosity manifesting in many ways. For me, I will always remember the joys of shopping in the shoe salons of Bergdorf's and Barney's in New York, where she was known to buy a pair in every colour, encouraged by me, knowing I would inherit said shoes unworn within a few months as we wore the same size. Last year she hired a ship and invited 78 of her family and friends to sail the Yasawa Islands in Fiji to celebrate her 80th birthday. It was an extraordinary time, and perhaps it may even be the start of a new family tradition. Mum was a great conversationalist and could discourse for hours on a wide range of topics, from spirituality to politics to shopping, often giving advice, but probably her favourite subject was anything World War II. World War II had an enormous impact on Mum's life. And dear sisters, I confess I have never watched Winds of War with Mother, although most of you have had to endure it two or three times. Her favourite movie of all time, I think, was Gone with the Wind. Georgia will elaborate. However, it was the sound of music that became a rite of passage in our family. She would insist on viewing it with each grandchild. I think Ren watched that particular movie for the first time aged 3 years old. And even though she pronounced to Grandma, "It's boring," at the time, she has since become a fan. For a farm girl, Lorraine was not a huge animal lover, so it was rather ironic that she married a devoted dog lover and had to share many romantic moments over the years with Bill's canine companions. She loved music. Particular faves were Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra, in fact any of the Rat Pack. She loved rock and roll and she could dance. She had no hesitation in introducing herself to people who would cross her path. There is a photo of Lee Grant kissing her at a cabaret in Auckland in the 1960s. He was a big star, and that picture appeared on the front page of the Sunday papers. Fran and I were mortified when she introduced herself to Alec Baldwin, who was breakfasting at a nearby table at the Beverly Wilshire a few years ago. She did the same thing with Mel Gibson when she was with me in Southern California last year. There are many of these stories. I hope you will join us following across at Baronia House to share some of yours. Over the period of her illness, Mum was surrounded by family members and friends. Fran, Fleur and I wish to extend a heartfelt thanks to our sisters Tracy and Joanne, whose medical expertise and compassionate natures ensured Mum got the very best of care. And Fran, Fleur and I extend same to you. As her time drew near, Mum was ready to go. She had said her farewells and had a strong spiritual belief that Billy Wood was waiting for her to join him. It is the most fervent wish of my sisters and I that you are right about that, Mum, and that you and Billy Wood are having the best time wherever you are, doing whatever comes next. We love you and we will miss you greatly.
Wow. You all knew my sister. I meant to give a bit of a humorous speech about some of the funny things that happened growing up with my sister. To me, Lorraine was many, many decades older. I won't tell you how many decades, but she was growing up when I was just born. But she was the archetype big sister. She was always looking out for me one way or another somewhere along the track. I'll never forget when we're in Lang Cove and we're walking down the mall. And I was just about to get married. So Lorraine was full of very good advice from a big sister for me. Well, as a young guy, I needed advice like you need a hole in the head. But Lorraine was insistent. And the salvation came in the form of a lady called Mrs. Ramsbottom. Mrs. Ramsbottom was one of the dowagers of Lang Cove. And she came waltzing up to Lorraine, looked her in the eye and said, "Oh, hello, Lorraine." Now, I could tell by the tense posture of my sister that she was stressed. She said, "Hello, Mrs. Ramsbottom, how are you?" Mrs. Ramsbottom then cast her eye at me, which was disturbing because it was only one eye. She looked me up and down and looked back at Lorraine and said, "Lorraine, is this your son?" Well, my sister was flabbergasted because she'd just turned 45 And here was a guy in an army uniform. And she just looked at me. She went, "Oh, God, no. This is not my son. This is my brother." Well, you shouldn't poke the bear, but I just had to. So I stepped back, looked at her, put my hand on her shoulder and said, "Mum, how many times have I told you not to say that?" I then very wisely took some big steps and put some distance between us. The funny thing was, Lorraine didn't laugh. I could tell by the angry look when she buzzed off to the office that I was in for it. And I was. Some time after, she said to me, "It wasn't funny, you know. She thinks that you are my son." I pointed out to her, I said, "You're old enough to be my mother." Again, not funny. But my sister was a special person. She'd always cared for me and looked out for me one way or another. And I'll never forget her ringing me up one day and saying, "Errol, I'm only going to tell you this once, and then I'm never going to tell you again." So I quickly bent over and kissed my butt goodbye, because my sister never told me something once and then never again. She said, "I'm opening up a hospital." I went, "Hell, real estate hospital? Really?" Trying to sound interested. She said, "Yeah, you're coming." I thought, "Oh, that's interesting." But she taught me about depression and what it was to live with depression from an alcoholic family. Because see, I'd spent my life up until then thinking everybody had alcoholic parents. But she took me in. She taught through the hospital a whole new world that existed. And I'm grateful for it. I'm still alive because of it. Because I honestly believe on the path that I had chosen, I would not have survived had my sister not intervened. So, although she may have helped you, she certainly helped me, and she was my sister. And I think the biggest thing that I can say is, when my trial came off fire, and when I felt so alone and so hard that I was arrested, it was my sister who stepped up and sent her solicitor straight to me. And he's a damn good solicitor too, I can tell you. And together we fought the fight, and when everything was settled and I was proven innocent and there was no longer any more issues, the very first phone call I got was from my sister. And all she said was, "Congratulations." She never said anything that could have been a blameworthy thing. She just believed in you always. And she was right. She's my sister, and I will miss her. Not always the hardest person or the easiest person to get on with, but she was definitely the best person to have in your corner when you needed help. She gave you the 100% support. And I'll tell you a typical example. When she sent her solicitor to me to help me, she didn't tell me, she just simply said to him, "Send your bills to me." That was my sister. You heard how proud she was of the war and her father's part in it, and how she went through the war and it affected her greatly. That was decades before I was born. But I got to see Winds of the War, and I got Frank Sinatra drilled in me and Elvis Presley. God, I don't like Frank Sinatra. But my sister, for all her faults and all her good points, has brought in 5 magnificent ladies who are my nieces, who I can officially say now, you don't have to call me uncle ever, as I used to try and force them to do when I was 10. I can say to you, your mother, my sister, who Lee I've known longer than all of you, was one hell of a woman, and I am so proud of her. Thank you.
My grandma leaves behind 10 grandchildren: Shannon, Mile, Ryan, Asher, Lily, myself, Sadie, Bede, Billy, and Wren. She had a huge influence on all of our lives, and I would like to honour her with a few words on their behalf today. Early last year, I collaborated with my cousins to create a memory and photo book for Grandma for her 80th birthday. In this book, each of her 10 grandchildren wrote out their favourite memories with Grandma and the influence and impact she has had on our lives. Over the past week, in preparation for today, I have been able to flick through the book and reminisce over the good memories. I found reoccurring themes throughout each grandchild's memories. The themes that resonated with me the most were the gratitude we all have for her generosity, the respect we had for her business savvy, the guidance we received through her spirituality, the encouragement we received from her to travel and to take interest in the world affairs and history, especially World War II, and an understanding of the family history from her many stories over the years. If you were to build a woman from the memories you found in this book, you would find yourself with someone who is strong, generous, vibrant, and humorous, and that's exactly what our grandma was like. Grandma did have some eccentricities, much to do with TV watching, which her grandchildren learned to live with, such as the rite of passage of sitting down and watching the 4-hour epic that is Gone with the Wind, World War II docos, and spending every evening with Eddie Maguire and Millionaire Hot Seat. As Grandma says every time, choose option B if you're ever in doubt. And I won't even go into the trauma that is Mrs. Brown's boys. These past 2.5 years, whilst Grandma has been sick, has been tough, not only on Grandma, but our entire family. Whether it be travelling halfway across the world for treatments or just caring for her at home. Despite all of this, Grandma stayed strong and faced each battle with good humour. All 10 of her grandchildren were in Fiji last year for her wonderful and extravagant 80th birthday celebrations. And I can honestly say that despite it being Grandma's birthday, it was us that was bestowed the best gift of a family holiday and bonding experience, so unique and which none of us will ever forget. So now, it is with great sadness we farewell our Grandma with love and gratitude for the amazing woman that she was. We'll miss you, Grandma.
Mercifully grant that through the risen history your servant Lorraine was fallen asleep in Christ, may rejoice to rise again through him, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever. And now Sadie's going to lead us in the first of the scripture readings.
A reading from the second letter of Paul to Timothy, chapter 4, verses 6 to 8. As for me, my life is already poured away. and the time has come for me to be gone. I have fought the good fight to the end. I have run the race to the finish. I have kept the faith. All there is to come now is the crown of righteousness reserved for me, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give to me on that day, and not only to me, but to all those who have longed for his appearing. The word of the Lord.
From the Holy Gospel according to John. Jesus said to his disciples, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God still and trust in me. There are many rooms in my Father's house. If there were not, I should have told you. I'm going now to prepare a place for you. And after I've gone and prepared you a place, I shall return to take you with me, so that where I am, you may be too. You know the way to the place where I am going." Thomas said, "Lord, we do not know where you are going, so how can we know the way?" Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Please be seated. As we gather here this afternoon to remember Lorraine, Almighty God, each one of us in this church is clearly reminded that on this earth we are all pilgrim people. God has given us life, and just as we now commend Lorraine to God this afternoon, you and I know that one day it will be our turn, when we hope that family and friends are gathered around us to ask the mercy and peace of God upon our soul. But we come here this afternoon with great confidence, because we believe in a loving, saving God. God our Father loves us so much that he sent his only Son, Christ the Lord, on earth to redeem us, which Christ did, of course, when he was raised up on Calvary for our salvation. And so that Lord loves and cares about each one of us. And we thank the Lord for all the love and all the blessings he showers on us. And today, in a special way, we thank the Lord for all the wonderful blessings and gifts that he gave to Lorraine in her life. We come today also to thank God for Lorraine's life. You know, people go through life and they touch many people's lives. But having listened to the family when they came to see me, as we got organised for today, and listening to what has been shared already, Lorraine touched just so many lives, unbelievable. There'd be very few people on the face of the earth who would touch as many lives as Lorraine has done in her lifetime. She brought not only love to the family, but she brought love and care to so many people and helped them. People who had some difficulties in their life, Lorraine reached out to them with great commitment, generosity and enthusiasm to help those people. And today we thank God for the wonderful generosity and all the love she brought to so many people. Lorraine, they showed me these booklets, so I saw them myself. Lorraine had lots of little prayer books, which were novenas. For those who don't know what a novena is, it's a series of prayers you say over a number of days, normally 9 days. A series of prayers. Lorraine had lots of those books that no doubt she treasured and prayed. So obviously God was important to her. And of course the family was important to her, and she reached out to so many. So today we thank God for the wonderful life of Lorraine, and we ask the Lord now to take Lorraine into his loving embrace. And now Faith is going to come forward to lead us in the prayers of the faithful. And I invite you to please stand for this prayer. Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through him. Let us pray with confidence to him who shared our earthly journey so as to bring us to our heavenly home.
Lorraine receiving the promise of eternal life in baptism. Lord, give her now communion with your saints forever. Lord, hear us.
Lord, hear our prayer.
Lorraine lives believing in Christ as the hope of her life. May Christ now lead her safely home to the Father's house. Lord, hear us.
Lord, hear our prayer.
We pray that the memories of Lorraine and her goodness will be cherished by all of her loved ones. Lord, hear us.
Lord, hear our prayer.
We pray for Lorraine's relatives and friends, especially her daughters Leela, Tracy, Frances, Joanne and Fleur, and their families. Lord, strengthen them and fill them with your peace. Lord, hear us. We pray for all those who have gone before us, especially Lorraine's husband Bill. May they welcome Lorraine into the joys of heaven. Lord, hear us. We pray for all who have gathered here to worship in faith. Lord, make us one in your kingdom. Lord, hear us.
We now
Firstly, I'd just like to say how honoured I am that the girls asked me to say a few things about Lorraine's business life. I don't know whether I'm the right person to talk about it, but I'll do my best. I met Lorraine about 20 years ago, just after Bill passed away, and I was introduced to Lorraine by Dave and Helen Cooper, and Dave got me aside one day and said, look, as a result of Bill's early passing, Lorraine is a bit overwhelmed with the financial position. Mate, could I give her some assistance? I said, certainly, I'd love to do that. So I sat down with Lorraine, and it was very clear to me that Bill was an entrepreneur. He had a few plates on a stick and had an interest in a number of businesses, including a storage business, an information storage business, blunts, and of course South Pacific Private Hospital. So Lorraine and I, over the next few months, tried to keep the plates going and did a lot of due diligence on the business to make some decisions moving forward. At the end of 3 months, we sat down. I said, look, Lorraine, I think it's very clear that 3 of the businesses have got to go, and she said, I agree. So we put a line through the storage businesses, and that left Blunts and South Pacific Private Hospital. I said, what do you think, Lorraine? She said, well, Bill told me that if anything ever happened to him, never sell Blunts. And she said, what do you think? I said, well, I agree with Bill 100%. You know, Blunts is a mature business. It's making money. It's in a good industry. South Pacific is a pioneer industry. It's losing money. I think it's a no-brainer. I said, let's put the South Pacific on the market. And she said, hang on, I didn't say that. She said, I've got no passion for Bloods. My passion is South Pacific Private Hospital. I said, but Lorraine, it's not making any money. And she looked at me, and I remember the words clearly. She said to me, George, if I focus on it, I'll make it successful. And the byproduct of success is financial reward. Well, that was a trend that lasted with me and Lorraine for the next 20 years. She'd ask my opinion, and she would do exactly what she wanted to do. One day she rang me and said, George, I'm going to buy the property next door. I said, Lorraine, what are you thinking at your age? Why do you want to deal with the banks? You know how tough they are. You've got to deal with builders. What the hell are you doing at this stage of life, committing to such a thing? She said, well, I want to increase the beds from 26 to 52. I said, well, you're making money at 26. Why commit yourself to this commitment? And she looked at me and she said, because I'm passionate about it, I know it's going to work. Intuitively, it's going to work. I said, well, let's at least sit down and do a business plan, a financial model to see whether it's logical. And she looked at me, she said, George, you can do all the financial models you like, I'm going to do this. As a businesswoman, Lorraine was stubborn. She made hard decisions. She was financially illogical. But despite that, she was successful. And she was successful because she had an unbelievable passion for the business. She had an unbelievable desire to help people with addiction. I think the real credit for Lorraine's financial stability goes to her accountants, Robert Barnes and Co. I know Robert, I'm pretty sure Robert and Russell McGee are here today, but I saw firsthand how they guided Lorraine through the tough times, starting off a business like South Pacific. There certainly was some ups and downs, and there was some very, very sensitive tax issues, and I've got to say that Lorraine's financial stability is attributed to them, and I think on behalf of the girls, I'd like to say thank you to you two guys. From a personal point of view, Lorraine was a very good friend, a good mate, and I admired her. And she was a good friend to my family as well. And I know I speak for all the friends who are here today that We're going to really miss you, Lorraine. We're going to miss your honesty. We're going to miss your controversial comments on in-depth subjects that you always so opinionated. We're going to miss your generosity. We're going to miss your parties, and most of all, we're going to miss you. And I know you and Bill are somewhere up there at the moment, and I hope there's a lot of people up there with addictions, so you can start South Pacific Hospital up there, and this time you can do it together. Thank you.
I know everyone thinks that their mother is one in a million, but I truly think ours may have been. After all, how many daughters have a mother who gave them a copy of Women Who Love Too Much at the age of 12? Or thought that a mother-daughter weekend doing a past life therapy workshop at the age of 13 would be fun? Or who flew their 18-year-old to a family week at the Meadows in Arizona, let alone wrote an autobiography entitled Love and Addiction? It's been said that life is a dance between making it happen and letting it happen. Well, that might make my mother the Ginger Rogers of life, doing it all backwards and in heels. She had the winning formula of courage combined with faith. Courage to leave home for teachers' training college with barely a penny in her pocket. The courage to leave a marriage and trust her heart to a man she barely knew. The courage to leave New Zealand and start a fresh life in Sydney with no friends or support. The courage to face her childhood hurts and dysfunction, beginning a healing journey that eventually led her to have the courage to be the co-founder of Australia's first treatment centre. Courage to demand equality in her marriage and business relationship with Dad. The courage to move to New York City in her 70s just for the adventure. And the courage to build a new wing at South Pacific in recent years. She also understood that courage is not the absence of fear, rather it is feeling the fear and doing it anyway. It's easy to gloss over someone's life and make it sound perfect or easy, and Mum wouldn't want that. There were tough days and dark nights. The loss of Dad, also to cancer, was a blow to our entire family, especially Mum. But she modelled to all of us resilience. She always got back up, put on her lipstick, and knew that everything was happening for a reason. One of my favourite stories from the early days of South Pacific, when the odds were stacked against her and Dad, client numbers were low, as was morale, and they were running out of money. There was $500 in the bank account, not nearly enough to pay the following week's wages. She called her friend, Sister Patricia, who frequently referred people, to ask for advice and, importantly, prayers. Sister Patricia said to write a cheque for $500 and send it to charity. With trembling hands, she did that. Monday morning, the phones rang, several clients booked, allowing her to pay those wages. If anyone ever came to her for advice, her refrain was always, hand it over, God's got it, or my favourite, just send them love. That faith of hers is perhaps the greatest of the gifts I've received from her. It has been very humbling this week to receive so many messages from people crediting Mum with saving their life or the life of someone in their family. I'm not sure she ever truly comprehended the ripple effect her courage and faith had and will continue to have for generations. I know our family could not be prouder of her and the legacy she's left behind. I know today that everyone has also mentioned her generosity, but it is impossible to think of Mum without including that. The joy of giving for Mum was perhaps the greatest of gifts from life. Christmases were the highlight of my childhood, with an abundance of food, laughter, and always a good measure of crazy. Did any other family hide Rocky Road in the washing machine being eaten before Christmas Day? Or gift unsuspecting son-in-laws with deworming medicine? I think she must also have had a very good relationship with Santa Claus, because our sacks were always brim and overflowing. Travelling in India with her and Dad, she would go to the ATM every day, withdraw 5,000 rupees out, all in 100 rupee denominations, and then she'd hand them out like candy to every passing beggar and leper. It was the equivalent in terms of buying power of handing out $100 notes. She almost caused a stampede at the Ganges one morning. If shopping was an Olympic sport, Mum would be a gold medalist. The markets in Hong Kong are still recovering from her and Marilyn, and that was 20 years ago. Determined not to miss out on shopping with us girls in LA last summer, where she was undergoing treatment for cancer, she had us hire her a wheelchair. I think she wondered why she hadn't done that a long time ago. If you ever questioned her spending or the cost of something, or even raised an eyebrow, she'd just look at you and say, "Don't worry, it's only money." But there's one shopping trip that is forever etched in my mind, and it's not about the material goods, because for someone who loves shopping, she was actually very non-materialistic. This shopping trip was about courage. It was the mid-80s, and the likes of Germaine Greer had well and truly woken women to the fact that they did not have to leave finances to men anymore. Tired of being kept on a budget and having no say, but doing half the work, she worked hard. Fran and I accompanied Mum into David Jones, and she shopped like there was no tomorrow. Every sales assistant in the store on multiple floors were running back and forth. Walking in the door at home hours later, laden with boxes and bags, I could see she was shaky and scared, wondering what Dad would do or say. But she held her head high and walked in with that steely look of determination she had. I think to her, shopping was always a symbol of that freedom and respect. One of the chapters in her book is entitled, "You Can't Bargain with God," which she says she learned not through lack of trying. I have a feeling Mother won't be resting in peace. Instead, she'll be trying to work out if it's easier to bargain with God in such closer proximity. She has, after all, promised to send husbands to all of her unmarried family members and girlfriends. She's promised a waiting list at South Pacific, and God will have some explaining to do on why Dad was taken so early and she was left single for 20 years. Over the last week, I've been wondering what Mum would want said today. What message would she want people to walk away with? And I think it would be this: do your inner work, get a therapist, go to 12-step meetings, find your passion, and have fun. Mum, you were one hell of a mother. One of the greats, full of passion and colour, always wanting the best for us and believing in us. I love you, and I'm so incredibly grateful to be your daughter.
Thanks very much, Fleur. Now we're going to have Thomas and David.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time. Accepting pain as an opportunity for growth and a pathway to peace. Trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, and that I will be guided by your grace, that I may be happy in this life and supremely happy with you in the next. And on behalf of the thousands and thousands of people's lives who Lorraine has changed and touched, I say thank you.
And now Francis is going to share a poem on the Great Trees Fall.
When Great Trees Fall by Maya Angelou. When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder. Lions hunker down, and tall grasses and even elephants lumber after safety. When great trees fall in forests, small things recoil into silence, their senses eroded beyond fear. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. We breathe briefly, our eyes briefly see with a hurtful clarity. Our memory, suddenly sharpened, examines, gnaws on kind words unsaid, promised walks never taken. Great souls die, and our reality, bound to them, takes leave of us. Our souls, dependent upon their nurture, now shrink, wizened. Our minds, formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves. And when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms. Slowly and always, irregularly, spaces fill with a kind of soothing, electric vibration. Our senses restored, never to be the same, whisper to us, they existed, we can be. Be and be better, for they existed.
Thank you, Francis. And now we're going to have a visual reflection from Lorraine. Give Lorraine